Thank you. At least it tells me now. I'm going to start the Student Achievement Committee meeting for May 22nd, 2024 at 4:34, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America,
to the
republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty
and
and
justice for all. Okay, thank you. I also want to congratulate and welcome Tina. This is your first indoctrination into being a Board of Ed member. And we're glad to have you.
Thanks, Lucy.
As the next item on the agenda is a public comment. Do we have anyone from the public that would like to speak? I guess if you raise your hand. Oh, there's Jamie.
I don't see any hands raised, Lucy.
No, I don't either. Okay, so we'll go to the next item, approval of the agenda. So motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Linda?
Yeah.
And anybody?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Tina. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we'll go to approval of the minutes of the April 24th, 2024 meeting. I did not find anything. I don't know if anyone else did.
No, motion to approve, Lindsay.
Okay, Lindsay approved the minutes. And a
Second, Linda.
Linda, thank you.
First in your hearts.
All
I've been like this all day.
Gosh, well, we're in for a ride, huh? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that's happened. So now we're down to item number 5, 5th and 6th grade schedules, and I'm not sure who is going to be starting. Well,
Lucy, could I say a few words before we jump into this?
sure.
Yes, and thank you. I apologize. I was a couple minutes late joining, but had some concerns since I've been here about sometimes the way that our schedules have worked in some of the grade levels, and specifically with what we're going to get to in the data piece with the math, compared to what I've seen, the amount of time that is being devoted to math in a daily schedule is something I've seen done differently in a lot of different places, especially in the No Child Left Behind era. And not that test scores are the be all and end all, but so I've been talking to both Cheryl and Noelle throughout the year about, are there ways that we could achieve that? And of course, we're also introducing the EL program and doing some other things too. So, and then of course, we had some questions also with the grade 6 specifically. So why don't we start with Cheryl in grade 6, because that might be a top of mind for folks. But when she's done, if you guys have questions for her, I'd like Noelle to tell you what she's planning for grades 4 and 5 for next year as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Doug. I'd be happy to start. So as Doug said, and I too don't think that test scores are the end all be all of everything, but I also believe that as a middle school, we have to prioritize literacy and numeracy, because my goal is to make sure that every student who leaves me at 8th grade is ready to take any course that's at Coggin-Chug or wherever they go. And with all of the new courses they're doing, like, to me, this is important. So what we did is we decided to prioritize 6th grade, the 6th grade schedule. Currently, they have all classes, whether they are related arts or a core area, meet 3 times a week for 70 minutes. What we decided to do instead is to have in the morning, which is the best time for learning, is to have the 3 academic courses that would meet. So ELA and math would meet every single day for 80 minutes all year long. And I know it looks like we took minutes away from science or social studies. We didn't. We just reallocated the time. So instead of them meeting for 70 minutes 3 times a week for the year, they will meet 5 times a week for 80 minutes. And Doug and I had tossed around the idea, do we want to do AB days for that so they have it year round? And then we decided not to, I think, in my mind, because it adds more confusion to them for the schedule, so that now students not only have to remember the rotation of the schedule, but they have to remember if they're AB. So we decided to do half year social studies, half year science. I want to reiterate the minutes are virtually the same. I'm a former social studies teacher. I would not give up social studies. That's just my bias. So students will have their academics in the morning. They will be actually going to second lunch. And then they will, after lunch, they will have their related arts and their electives. If they also have resource or any other special instruction, they will also get it after school. So the resource, the related arts and the electives will be 51 minutes. They've got 2 courses after.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do we have a copy of this? It's hard for me to process this.
No,
Okay.
I'm
So-
sorry.
Again, this isn't on you. It's just that this has been kind of happening where we don't have things in front of us. I can't visualize, process what's happening without seeing it. So if you could send it to us at some point, that'd be great.
That to you. And I don't know, I think I just kept talking, so I don't want to overwhelm you with words. But essentially, we're prioritizing the core area for our 6th grade students. We see through the data that they're coming in, and we want to make sure that they are reading, do everything we can, that they are reading, writing, and math or numeracy, that they are on grade level by the time they leave 8th grade. So we are committing ourselves to the daily of those courses. And we are doing it in the morning, which for those of you who are educators, you know that it's better to teach in the morning than it is after lunch, right? You get a lot more done. At the same token, though, we are rotating the first 3 blocks, because there is a difference between a 7:30 class and an 8:30 class. So we want to rotate it so that we see the full picture of them. And now I'll stop and take any other questions.
Are there any questions, thoughts?
Cheryl, so a question I had too, is there any data behind when we're talking about science and social studies and losing out on that time, if we're doing it half year, what that does to the student achievement in that time frame where they're not having that period of either social studies or science?
So they're not losing time. I don't know offhand if there's research. I do
No,
know.
I meant the amount of.
Oh, no, she's gone.
No, she's back.
You got cut off.
I think I'm just gonna jump in until she comes back, but I think what she's questioning too is what maybe more what I'm thinking, especially with the NGSS, like, you know, again, it's not about the test scores and everything isn't about the test scores, but I would be interested too to know, do we have data on, you know, will this affect, you know, having not had science for possibly 6 months and then being given an exam? I just wonder if we put them at a detriment of trying to take this test, whereas if they were consistently seeing the material and having it fresh in their minds, you know, that would just be my concern. And I'm not sure if that's what Lindsay was talking about too, but
Okay.
Yeah, I was struggling for the word retention. I was worried about the retention in social studies and science in that long period that they wouldn't be having that subject.
Which is a valid concern. They do, though, we don't test NGSS until the end of 8th grade. So even if they had science the beginning of 6th grade, they would get it 7th grade and 8th grade again.
If I
Cheryl,
could
if we
jump
have-
in here too, I've seen this model done a lot of different places. And I think there would be a concern you know, from my perspective, if we were talking about doing only math for a semester or only ELA, because the numeracy and literacy are so fundamental. And as Cheryl mentioned, some people would do this every other day to keep it going throughout the year. From the teacher perspective, and as a reminder, I'm a science teacher, so I can get behind this, and I've done it both ways. What you gain in being able to have the children every day, and for those longer blocks, getting into like some of those lab things on the science side, and you can speak better to the history side with the activities, is you can get some deeper learning because the meeting is so frequent. And I don't believe the topics in science and history are like the topics in math and ELA, where having that gap that Lindsay was asking about is going to so much hurt, because what you have is you have more of a survey type content in history and science, whereas with math and ELA, it kind of builds. And those are kind of fundamental. But certainly there are people that wouldn't want to do something like this. I guess I just want to make sure you know that this is not like something super radical in terms of like doing it by semesters. And I believe even at the elementary level, our science and history are kind of integrated, and they're not daily in every. I mean, Noelle, can you speak to that at all? At least what happens at your school? I don't want to just say that and be wrong.
You're correct. What I've seen across the district in K-5, and even in other districts that I've taught in as an elementary teacher, is that we didn't have science or social studies every day. We kind of would do a science unit and then do a social studies unit, so that just like you were saying before about that learning building on each other, if we are fluctuating between science and social studies, and one day you're talking about American Revolution and the next day you're talking about like ecosystems, it is a big shift in content. So from the elementary point of view, that we have done one unit and then switched off and gone to another unit.
I have a
I
But
question.
we haven't gone 6 months. Oh, sorry, Tina. Go
That's
ahead.
okay. That's okay.
I'll-
Bob said something too. Bob, you wanna,
Oh,
your question?
I was concerned that if we were trying to do any outside science activity, you know, you would be limited to the season that you were teaching the course in, and you wouldn't have year-round experiences if you had any outside science activity. And it would seem to me that the two biggest issues that are facing our country now are climate change and democracy. And we should be kind of feeling that, you know, these are two things that they should be taught every day, every school, every, you know, that these are the critical things that the kids have to think about. There's a, you know, a major presidential election coming up, and they'll be in the midst of it.
My question was, oh, sorry, Bob. I don't know if
No,
anybody.
that's that. No,
Okay. I have a bunch of questions. You all know I've taught at Strong for years. NGSS was kind of my jam when we were rolling out engineering courses and whatnot. My first question was, like, is there a plan for what evidence you're going to use, what data you're going to use to show that the increase in instructional time is actually working?
Not at this point,
Okay.
but that's obviously something that we would sit down and figure out.
Okay. My next question is about the schedule. During the student orientation, families were given a copy. And, you know, I'm looking at it through my related arts lens, and I'm seeing that along the bottom, it's showing that there are 4, like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, times for art, health, PE, TI rotation. I'm assuming that's per quarter. You know, the kids would have art for 1 quarter, PE for a quarter. But then, so that shows across 4 days. Then at the bottom, there's a bullet point that says related arts classes meet 3 times per week. So what does that actually mean?
So I'm not sure which paper you have, but they meet 3 times per week, 51 minutes per period. And then you might be thinking about, we also have some electives that we're starting for 6th graders.
Okay.
that are also meeting in there. And
Okay.
remember, we also have the different musics. We're
Mhm.
continuing to support music. Students are able to take both band and chorus.
Yep.
Um,
So then, how many sections then of related arts will that be? Like how many TI sections, for example, would the teacher need to be teaching at any given quarter?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I
Okay.
do know that they all fit, because we do have a large sixth grade coming in.
Right.
Larger than has been since I've been there by quite a bit, like almost a class size.
Right. Right. I think it's like 120 kids or something. So if suppose there are 4 sections of TI that are offered per quarter, that would be 30 kids in a class. And I would just really caution and recommend, I don't think, I mean, I know that number is not in line with the district policy on class size, but I also really would caution about safety, putting 30 kids in a wood shop at a time.
Agreed. No one can hit on that,
Right. And there are like industry standards that you can look at in terms of recommendation. It's anywhere from like 75 to 150 square feet per student at any given time. And that includes equipment, meaning like what floor space is available for the kids.
And I've talked to Karen Bransfield. She's done the scheduling.
Mhm.
And that was one of my concerns because of the large numbers.
Right.
And they're not. They're at their typical size. I want to say they're between 20 and 24.
Okay.
Which 24 is still, I know, on the high side, but usually it does fit within, within our guidelines for how much space and students.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, Jamie.
Hello, thank you for being here, Cheryl,
You're welcome.
Liza. So while I have Cheryl and Noel together, I would like to see visually, like Dr. Darcy would, what does it look like when a student leaves Memorial and now enters Strong? What sort of support and communication do you have between Memorial and Strong? Just to identify, I mean, I know we have a lot of people, a lot of different responsibilities, but is it clear to the people that work with you, Noel, and that work with Cheryl, just to like, here we go, the new group coming in? Or is it just, oh no, I'm going to get rid of mine Memorial. Here you go, Cheryl, bye-bye. No, I'm assuming that's not the case, but that is an important link that we need to put together. And I think I want to know how they're supported, the 6th graders coming in, other than step up day.
Right. Well, Noel, I'll let you jump in after too. The teachers do meet and they talk about students coming up and strengths and concerns and give them a good picture. And then Noel and I also meet and discuss students as well. So we have a really good handle on kids coming in, and then we know if extenuating circumstances or things that we should know, that we know before they show up in the building. Sometimes I don't want to give an example, but perhaps a trauma history on something like that's good for us to know.
We're small enough of a district where we should be able to do that extraordinarily well. I mean, think about what goes on in other districts where you have many different sending schools to the next, and that's very difficult. One more, just on the subject of the related arts and the electives. We addressed this last year, and Tina, you weren't here for that, but I did put a big point on the safety aspect, and I was reassured no kid does anything until they know how to restrain their hair or wash their hands or do all these things. And it is difficult, but that is priority number one, because, if something can go wrong, it will go wrong when you have 24 kids in a place where they're now going to be using their hands. And it's important that they do, but I was reassured last year that safety is not an issue, and I'm happy about that. But I would add, if we're concerned about the aspect of social studies and science, with a potential new schedule, one way or another, those electives and those related arts, one way can support those things throughout the year. And, I'm encouraged as a trade teacher to support math and literacy every single day within the trade of culinary arts. But, there's a way to do everything. So I just, any way that can happen. I mean, I've seen teachers in the past in District 13, okay, they weren't so good in the classroom, but we're learning medieval history. And kids that were good with their hands built a medieval torture device in a miniature scale, and they loved it and they did it. Just there's always ways to support the other things that we think we might be missing. And we do know kids learn by different modalities anyway, so may as well embrace it and run with it.
Perhaps a trebuchet, not the rack, though. Just saying. I have a quick question or just comment to, as you're developing your plan, make sure that there's prep for those teachers who are going to go from a short to a long period, so that it's not just more of the same, but they're really using that block the way it's designed to be used.
I was wondering, how is that 80 minutes structured? Is it just a straight 80 minutes, or is there a break in between, or how is it being?
Your chocolate milk.
So remember, teachers are going from 70 minutes
Okay.
to 80. And so since that's been the schedule for a while,
That's right.
I am doing, we've done for a few years now, training and teaching in the block. We do station rotation, we pull small groups. They do a lot of different things, brain breaks. The team is actually talking about also giving them maybe some sort of, there will be some sort of snack time for them at the same time. They are young, right? And there will be potentially like a very short amount of time in between, maybe halfway through the second block, to get them to even just run around the building or do something. So, because it is hard to sit, right? But that's why we have to plan so carefully to make sure that to me, it should be 20, 40, 60, 80 minutes. So you've got 4 different activities in that 80-minute block, so that and sometimes it's just a quick transition to get up and switch to that table or switch activities here. So that I'm confident about. And actually, I find it interesting because I was worried initially when I first started at Strong that 70 minutes was a long time for 6th graders. And so I did ask them about their opinions. I mean, it was very informal about the schedule. And a lot of students told me they liked the longer schedule because you can really get into things, was their words. And I think it's because it gives teachers the ability to do depth versus breadth. So that's just informal feedback.
I'm sorry, I have to run, but one more question, Cheryl, is that 6th grade schedule the same as the 7th and 8th?
No, the 7th and the 8th will remain the same. They will be 70 minutes 3 times a week. And their schedule, that's the current schedule that 7th and 8th grade that everybody has now. So we're really, and one of the concerns, especially the 6th grade teachers have, is that we don't see the kids every day. So now this is 5 days a week that they will be meeting. But 7th and 8th will stay the same, 3 times a week, 70 minutes.
So, just to piggyback on that question, I just want to clarify it. So currently, 6th graders are getting 70 minutes 3 times a week of ELA and math, right?
And every course they take.
Okay. And next year in ELA and math, they're going to be getting 80 minutes 5 days a week.
Correct.
Okay. So that's a difference between, that's an increase in almost 200 minutes a week. It almost doubles the instructional time, which, you know, if the goal is to increase instructional time, goal met. But my question is, in terms of professional development, I believe that it's going to take a lot more than making sure that teachers can meet for a period a day to make sure they're rowing in the same direction, especially with the new curriculum being put upon them. Is there a plan for PD for them, either, you know, in-service days where they can have, you know, a day to themselves, you know, once a quarter, whatever they need? Like, have they been surveyed about what kind of PD they're going to need to make sure that they're up to speed and ready, like, so that they're not feeling like they're constantly just one day ahead of the kids?
So mostly it's math and ELA that are gaining more time. The others still have their same curriculum. They are they are thrilled to have more time. So I'm not concerned with that. I mean, I do understand what you're saying, but we do have the PD now that's very personalized. So people can, if this is what they want to do their PD time on, they can, which is which is a pretty nice thing. They're not just getting the PD that I think they need. They're also able to engage in what they think will support their practice.
If I can add on to that as well, we are starting PD with the grade 6 team next week. They're going to join us with a Kidam rep when he comes in, and then they're going to have a couple of hours to start working on looking at the first module together. And that's going to be all the 6th grade teachers that will be teaching ELA starting next year. I have also been having conversations with Jen, Penny, and actually some special education teachers that are co-teachers in the math classroom on things that they want to continue working on with the Building Thinking Classrooms routine. They want to start incorporating more practices. So that's going to be something that they're going to focus on next year. And in terms of August, Strong is, Cheryl and I have to still yet have a conversation. It's been difficult this time of the year because all of the things to wrap up the school year, but there's a lot of time in August for the Strong staff to really get more personalized PD. And so we're starting to kind of figure out exactly what it is that their needs are so that we can make sure that we plan accordingly for when they come back. But we are starting this year just so that they can kind of get a jump start on that PD.
That's good. That's helpful to know. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Steph. I meant to say that and got sidetracked.
I wanted to touch on the electives because the board was very concerned about eliminating as much as possible, if not completely, study halls. So what do you have on the docket for electives?
So they have each teacher that hasn't already been teaching electives will be teaching electives. So my 3 world language teachers each have a different elective. Lisa Killian has another elective. And who am I forgetting? So yeah, everyone does have an elective. The one that stands out to me, because I think it's the coolest thing ever, is going to be called Ag Ventures. And it's Heather Almodovar. She's going to be teaching that as her elective, and it'll be a little bit about science because she's talking about they will be doing plant and animal sciences, but not necessarily, it's more of a fun hands-on. She's already talking about we have a lot of farms in Durham, things like that, even wreath makings, all kinds of things that they're looking to incorporate. So, and I'm trying to remember what the other 4 are. So we have 5 of them.
The hard thing I have with that, Cheryl, is that when the board gave the direction on the electives all came from the core related arts.
Right.
And that sounds exciting on Ag Point, but it doesn't it doesn't prepare and get these kids excited for the electives around those related arts. And so if we're not highlighting in 6th all of the related arts in that type of career field on top of limiting social studies and science during the year, not in instruction time, just about time spent during the year, I see so much more than a master schedule change here, which is hard for me to wrap my whole brain around. And I know that we want to be flexible and really think about the kids and their personalized learning. I just think this is a really large jump for a grade coming from 5th who has, we have a large high needs population in that grade. I don't know behaviorally, I can't remember how that grade is behaviorally, but is this feasible, or 80-minute periods feasible with kids sitting in a desk for 80-minute periods every day in core subjects, on top of not having what the 7th graders have, which is kind of what we put in place last year. I'm really struggling with it. I'm just having a hard time.
You just reminded me, Carolyn LaRosa is the one I'm missing. Her enrichment course is designed, and this is right in the write-up, to prepare students to do the upcoming electives that she has in STEM with Makerspace. keep in mind too, that students will still have their rotation of related arts, which includes health, which includes TI, enrichment, which is Tina's, and then PE. So they do have a lot of options other than the core areas.
If I may, I've been working with a couple of the teachers who are building those electives. One is thinking about digital music as one of the options in 6th grade. The other one is thinking about global movement and dance. And the other one is thinking about global sports and games. They're in the initial stages. I've just been talking about possible activities with them. So that is subject to change based on interest and availability. But those are the 3 others that are currently in progress.
Thanks, Liza. And I do think that's great. Again, I struggle. I think we're almost in June and we currently don't have a curriculum or a plan for certain electives. And so we, as a board, need to be able to know what exactly these kids are going to be learning in their classes day to day. Even with the electives that we asked for strong for the year before, we knew what was coming up in those classes. We had the printouts, we saw what the classes were going to be. The board was, on board and excited for it. I think that just so much is, like you just said, it's to be determined, so again, I have a hard time getting on board with to be determined. I don't know how to be determined gets me to an answer where I feel okay that the schedule is going to work. And I feel like it's a grade that has had a lot of experimentation with their scheduling and their curriculum already in 5th grade. And I want them to be successful. And I need more. And I don't know how everyone else feels, but this is the realm of where I feel at this point.
Right, and that's what I was going to say, and Lindsay beat me to it, but we kind of think the same. To be able to see what the schedule would look like, what's available for the students once you get that all set up, we'd like to see that. I believe last year we had a listing of what the electives were, and so we were well aware of what the students had for options. So I think we'd like to see that.
I do want to clarify too that they do have what you were given last year, which is the course description. I think what Liza's referencing is they're looking to already start lesson planning, aligning it to outcomes and standards and so forth. It's not like they don't know what they're going to do yet.
Yes, yeah. We're actually, the 2 of them have asked to work on the 13th, to come in the 13th and the 14th, which they're not contracted to do so because they've already met their PD hours, but they're going to come in for curriculum work on those 2 days to start the full curriculum process of making units and lesson planning.
Keep in mind, we're currently running a school year and, that's a whole nother side job to do. So I'm a little bit empathetic in the situation.
Absolutely.
Knowing that we've got to get through this school year. Yes, I'm so happy we at least have a plan on June 13th and 14th to now figure it out for next year. Yes, it seems like the seat of the pants and I can see how it doesn't look good, but I'm empathetic in this situation. We got to get through this school year. Absolutely, and do the best we can, then focus on next year as much as we can. It's not easy.
And I do see, I am completely empathetic to that, to the point where I actually think I'm over empathetic that we're asking teachers to last minute make electives for the following year. I think we're putting a lot of stress on this 6th grade team. They're already getting a new program and now they're getting an entirely new schedule. I'd love to hear from them and to know whether they think this is, in their professional opinion, statistically going to work. And again, that we keep hearing the words to be determined, or we're going to do this, or we think this might work. I need to see the data that it's going to work, because this is a continuation of the conversation that I've had for the past year with the 5th grade. And I wish we had kind of talked about 5th grade before, because that probably would have segued a lot into this. But I feel like we had so many questions and so many concerns in the fall, early winter, even spring, that weren't addressed, and I believe wasn't successful in a schedule, in my personal opinion. And now we're being asked to say, you know, trust that we're going to make this work for the 6th grade. And I don't feel like I can sit there and have that, because I don't feel like I got, and the board got what we needed for the 5th grade. And I think that a lot of things were left out. We have found out nothing this year on whether 5th grade has actually done any social studies, whether that social studies has been successful within the Open Studio, I believe, with these projects that they were doing. The board needs to have more of a role in curriculum. And by state statute, we do. And I want everyone to be on board and understand that and work together and to develop and implement what is best for kids.
I'm happy to speak to any of the 5th grade. Obviously, I didn't prepare any. I came prepared to talk about what the schedule looked like for next year. I didn't come prepared with like data from this current year right now. But what I can say, and I do understand your concerns, and I appreciate your support in trying a new schedule for the 5th grade that would hopefully increase instructional time and also build some of the connections that were really difficult when we had such young learners rotating between 5 teachers every day. So I do agree that there are definitely parts of the 5th grade schedule that are less than ideal for this year. Hats off to all of the teachers for giving 120% this year. The Open Studio blocks, you are correct, like that had been the intention, and we worked together to come up with a plan for actually following the social studies curriculum during those Open Studio blocks and doing projects. Once the school year got underway, a lot of related services wound up pulling from the Open Studio blocks in an effort to not take from their designated literacy and math time, which then created a counterproductive environment for the classroom teacher to then be instructing in a content area. Some of the classroom teachers, along with support from our coach, did try a couple of different models through the winter to make Open Studio successful with social studies integration. And then we met as a team and decided that there were 2 units that for social studies that really had not been covered content wise. Now remember, for social studies, there's the inquiry standards and the content standards. The inquiry standards are definitely addressed because they're interdisciplinary, and they weave through a lot of those reading research and writing and then coming up with a reason for a hypothesis that you had is carried through with science and literacy and in math as well. But what we did to integrate the content was working with Ms. Biancardi, who was teaching primarily science. She took a look at her science units and then took a break with the science unit and taught social studies, the unit. And then she went back to a science unit, and then now is ending the year in a social studies unit again. So I do feel confident in our teachers that they have hit the content standards that we needed to through grade 5 for social studies. And the inquiry standards are really woven into so much of the school day. But I would be happy to have a conversation with anyone, or if there is any other further information you would like. It definitely didn't play out the way that we anticipated Open Studio to plan out. And once looking at, individual needs and providing the services that are either legally bound to us or through intervention plans, that Open Studio wound up being a time that many students were taken out of, which did not make it ideal for project work and team-based experiences.
Can I pop in for a second? I did want to say, I'm glad, thank you, Noelle, for sharing the challenges that were related to kids being pulled out of Open Studio. That's something that, as long as I've been in district, that's been an issue with whatever area kids are pulled from. It doesn't matter if it's technology, it doesn't matter if it's band, it doesn't matter if it's science or social studies or enrichment. Every time you pull kids out of a content area, this isn't a new problem, they don't get the content and the experiences that we are thinking they're going to by participating. So my thought would be in moving forward, whether it be with the 6th grade schedule for next year, or the 5th grade schedule for next year, to just acknowledge that ahead of time, that when we say, well, it's just going to be a couple of kids pulled out, it's going to be every so often, it never is every so often, and it's never just a couple of kids. So if we are aware of that going into next year and creating the schedule, then, you know, then there won't be this question. My other thought, shoot, what was it? All right, I'll come back to it.
If the open studio didn't work this year, what are you planning to do next year? What's the plan, the schedule?
That's a perfect segue, Lucy. Thanks. So I can discuss 5th grade. And I just, I'm going to keep this timely. We have our 5th and 4th grade band, 5th grade band, and 5th grade chorus concert tonight. And students are going to start coming in that door in about 15 minutes. So I will have to head out at about 5:30. But our plan, and a lot of this, just like Tina was saying too, it involved really listening to feedback from all of our certified and uncertified staff about the school year and what we needed to do to make it a success. So our model for next year is going to be more of a one teacher model. So we are going to be very similar to that for K4. And as K4 has operated, we will have 5 4th grade classes, 5 5th grade classes, and that will allow them a little bit more flexibility with their academic time. So this year, while we were beginning the EL program, we planned for 120 minutes of ELA instruction. Now, as you've all said too, 120 minutes, 80 minutes, 70 minutes, even 20 minutes sometimes is an incredibly long amount of time for our youngest learners to be sitting. So what the feedback was, especially from the 3rd and 4th grade teams, is they appreciated having a little bit more flexibility with their schedule because their learners were not transitioning to other classes. So it's not that class had to end for them at 10 o'clock. They could take a break and come back to it at 2 o'clock if they chose to, because they're the sole instructor for their classroom, for their like homeroom class. So given teacher feedback and actually feedback from all of the certified and non-certified staff, we really think that having flexibility with academic time allows for the services to be provided in a way that will allow for not just pulling during like an open studio like we just mentioned. It actually also allows for us to focus more on climate and connections. What we've really noticed with our youngest learners is that they need time to really focus on the social and emotional development. And when we are switching between 3 or 4 teachers, however many teachers it might be, there are things that happen on a daily basis in a classroom. Like, for example, I was just talking with a teacher today that was going to do a restorative circle at the end of the day because of a situation that had happened at recess. And by having a class all day long, that gives her the flexibility to do so. And that's where we're feeling we still need to provide direct, explicit instruction in those social and emotional skills to help our learners develop. And we all actually took part in a play-based training session where I'm sure that you're familiar with the new legislation and how it's coming down the pike. And we did have a session with Karen Gray at Memorial School during one of our faculty meetings. And it really focused a lot on the social emotional development as well as the executive functioning skills. And those are so many of those non-academic skills that really can inhibit the development of academics. And we are all, it seemed like the feedback from the faculty meeting was very positive, and that we are looking to make sure that we are purposefully giving our learners some time to be working on those skills. And by allowing the teachers the flexibility in their schedule to have ELA maybe one day 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, another day maybe 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, they can do that. So that is our plan. it is not a change in the amount of instructional time that we're spending in math or literacy or science or social studies. What we're going to be doing in 5th grade is the same thing as we're doing in 4th grade currently. And I believe it's the same as the other grade levels as well, from my experiences at Brewster and Lyman in the past. And that just means that they will be teaching a science unit and then a social studies unit and then a science unit and then a social studies unit and go back and forth with that. And I have actually been in conversations with the 5th grade team just even today about what that might look like and how we might do that moving forward. Are there
So
any?
it sounds like science and social studies and the other topics will be taught throughout the year as
Yep.
opposed to this year. Okay, I think one of my biggest concerns is that you had a schedule change that you were trying for 5th grade, and now those 5th graders are going to 6th grade, and they're also having a schedule change which hasn't been tried before. And it seems as though this one particular group is being experimented on. And I would just caution that when you're going to make changes like that, they really should be very well vetted before they're put out there. You know, I mean, I know every so often something doesn't quite work right, but a little something not working right is different than a whole section of learning is missing.
I completely understand what you're saying. And I do have to say that the schedule that we used for 5th grade this year was not any different from many schedules that are used in, across the United States for, upper elementary schools where they do switch between a couple of teachers. They still delivered the content, like the literacy, the math, that was all delivered. The way in which we used Open Studio wound up shifting. But that was, for many students, their favorite part of the day because they did get a lot of small group attention and one-on-one attention based on what they needed at that time. It was a shift for them from 4th grade to 5th grade because 4th grade was the one teacher model. And then 5th grade, they did have 3 teachers, but we did not like decrease or change the instruction that we were providing or the curriculum that we were providing, but we did reflect on, our practices come January and decide we needed to do something to integrate the content standards because it wasn't actually playing out in social studies the way we intended. And I'm being completely honest with you about that. That's not, I wouldn't come here and say that something was successful when it in fact wasn't. And I think that's why we're going back to this approach. And I also talked with the 5th grade team about the importance of, that collaboration and that planning, because now with everybody teaching the different content areas, they really need to, leaders need to emerge in their given domains that they are more confident in. And then we just need to, lead the rest of our team and support the rest of our team in the content areas that maybe they haven't taught in a couple of years.
And I'm going to agree with Tina that pullouts are the bane of education, because even when I was teaching, they're notorious. So, and sometimes they're being pulled out for instrument lessons in the middle of a language arts. And it just drove me crazy. So as much as possible as that scheduling can be reasonable, it would be much better. Tina, do you remember what you were going to say? And then we'll move on. No.
I did. Like I've kind of been geeking out on the roles of the Board of Ed and the role of the Student Achievement Committee. And a couple of the things that come up in and I do feel for the teachers that are, like you talked specifically about Jess Biancardi needing to take a break from science and switching over to social studies. And that didn't sound planned or, like it was it wasn't really in the cards at the beginning, and she had to like bob and weave and figure it out. One of the roles that, and Lucy, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're supposed to work with administration on the development and implementation and maintenance of a program for curricular review. So like taking a look and helping, right? Or participating in the review of, I'm just reading right off of the roles, like participating in the review, evaluation and development of the district's curriculum. That doesn't mean that the board is directing the curriculum or telling teachers what to teach. That's their job. That's their expertise. Jess Biancardi, she's the science, lady. She's the social studies lady, or, whatever. Pick a teacher, name the topic. They're the content expert. Like, that's not our role, but we are here to help. So like, this isn't something I feel like in this moment, you might be feeling like you're just answering a lot of questions from the group and it's awkward, maybe, who knows? I don't know. But this should be more like a group of people rowing in the same direction, and we're here to help with all of this. So in coming up with, the electives, like the group can share some of that weight and some of that burden and some of that help, so that we're not at a point now in May at the end of the year asking questions about like, hey, what happened to science, or what happened to social studies in 5th grade? So, Lucy, again, correct me if I'm off base, but I feel like the role of the committee, like we could be being utilized sooner than May.
And I
Abs-
apologize for interrupting, but I do have a lot of students at the door that are patiently waiting to come in and get ready for their concert.
Good luck tonight.
So thank you so much. And please, anyone, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to discuss, what's going on at Memorial. So have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, Noelle. And I'm actually, my question I had was actually for Cheryl anyway. Going back to the Memorial schedule, Cheryl, I just wondered, I'm still just not really sold on, I'm not a fan of the half year. I know several people gave their reasons and I agree with all of them. One, the retention issue, and then also like Bob said, I mean, I worry that maybe some instruction would not happen that could have happened because it happens to not be in the time of the year that we're covering topics. So I just wondered if is that set in stone, or are we here talking about if that is a potential thing, or is that the definite schedule for next year? Because I think that parents are going to not receive that very well. And I almost would prefer, I get that it's for scheduling purposes, and I just would think that maybe if there was a choice, that maybe something more like what the elementary does, or like Noelle had said that they're going to adopt now after the plan that they had last year didn't work, where I'm not sure if scheduling wise is something more like every other month or every 2 weeks or every other week, so that it's a more consistently spread out throughout the year that they're receiving instruction in both of those. And really important, especially during election year. And then given, our scores in science, I really do feel that it would be detrimental for us to do that. So I just wondered again, is that set in stone, or are we here to just kind of, is it a possibility to reschedule that?
I'll defer to you after Doug, but yeah, this is the schedule that we are creating at this point. That is put into place. I do want to answer, because I didn't answer Bob's question about like time of year and if that changes. They should be getting the same curriculum regardless in 6th grade. There is a set curriculum that they will follow. If there was something that we had the opportunity perhaps for some science-oriented field trip or something along those lines, that's a simple that we could bring all the students, right? It doesn't we usually, when we do field trips, unless they're very small for the older grades, we would bring the entire 6th grade. So that I'm not concerned about as far as them getting different curriculums or different opportunities.
Do you guys, do you know, or could you send us middle schools that you know of that adopt this, as opposed to like schools that have it both subjects throughout the entire school year. Do you know of schools that are successful adopting this? And can you send those to us?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to see, and I don't think I've gotten an answer to it, how having a high needs grade level sitting for 80-minute periods is going to be beneficial even with breaks. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that. And I know we don't have Jen Keen on here, but I don't know if Stephanie and Liza can.
I could speak to it for, just from experience. I mean, my previous school didn't have 80-minute blocks by any means, but a school I taught at in Chicago, which was a middle school, did. And I, just like how Cheryl had said, one of the important things is that the PD that the teachers were receiving on, teaching in the block and really understanding how to maximize that time, but also not to just stand up and lecture the entire time. I think that there's always going to be pros and cons, no matter which direction you go in, but based on, how I handled it, and especially with kids that were struggling in math and had IEPs and 504 plans and everything like that, it really gave me an opportunity to do a lot more within the classroom, to break the kids up into smaller groups and break them up based on their needs in that moment. So it wasn't always, I didn't label them high, medium, low groups. It was right now in this moment, this is what you need. And so you're going to be a part of this group, and, vice versa, navigate around the room, group them, making sure that those activities that are there for them are something that, they can work on independently, but then also that there is that guidance, that you have that plan in terms of how you're going to be able to make sure that you go around and that you meet with all of those kids and that you're interacting with them and that you're making sure that they're understanding what they're doing. And I think one of the additional things that is now at Strong is that the co-teaching model. And I think that's also going to be huge with having a longer block of time, because those teachers together, I mean, I was just in a classroom 2 weeks ago watching a co-teaching lesson, and it's amazing because they really do bounce back and forth off of one another, and the kids are really getting what they want. And as Cheryl had said, with some of the teachers and some of even what the students have said, it gives them so much more time to dive deeper into the content. Whereas when you are doing a shorter block of time, first of all, you lose a lot of time because, the kids come straggling in and they're not there on time. And then, by the time you're wrapping things up, you have to make sure they understand what the expectations are for the next day. They understand what they're going to be doing when they come back, what their expectations are at home, if they have homework or other activities that they have to complete. So there needs to be time for that. And then they have to leave. So you're really already carving out a lot of time, transition time in a middle school classroom. So really having that time there's a lot of benefits to it. We are just going to make sure that our teachers continue to get that support so that they understand how to best use that time, so that they're not just standing at the front of the classroom lecturing the entire time, because obviously we know that's not effective, no matter if you're in an 80-minute class or if you're in a 40-minute class. But again, I think with any schedule, nothing's going to be perfect. There's always going to be pros and cons. It's just really how the teacher uses that time. There's a lot of benefits to having a longer class period.
I mean, I think too, you make a point too, when you're talking about the co-teaching model. And this is something I have, experience with my child. And I do think, especially one of my children has really benefited from this in one of the core subjects. But I think we also look at it from a perspective here. Student achievement hasn't gotten any information this year on whether that co-teaching model that was implemented at Strong this year has been successful. So we have so many what ifs that's why we're sitting here and grasping at asking for data and asking for where this has worked, because we, at least myself, I feel like we are constantly be given give us a chance and let us do this and let us do this and let us do that. And we have to buy into that. We're at a point where I'm frustrated to buy into something again, because our role is to make sure that the curriculum is there and kids are successful, that their student achievement is at our highest regard. And we're going to look at test scores in a little while. are those test scores going, you know, I think a lot of the conversations we're having are very dependent on the other. And I think if we talked about the scores first, we'd have different conversations on this whole scheduling. And now we're having scheduling. And I think we're going to have a lot of conversations based on what we see in the data based on the scheduling. And I think we're really, really rushing here. And I want to be sensitive to the staff and the administration and to whoever's developing the curriculum, whether it's the teachers or it's Stephanie and Liza. We need to find a way to make sure that every party and every stakeholder is comfortable with what we're doing before we end this year. That's all I'm asking.
Right. I want to say a couple of things. We've been at this for about an hour. And the first of all is, I don't think that this discussion is over. I think now that we have some background on why the changes were made and what the changes are, even though we don't have a totally clear picture because some of it is still being worked on, we probably will be bringing this up again or making some other types of comments. I keep hearing that data is not important, but how else do you figure the success of a program or an approach without having some type of assessment? I mean, there's evaluations on people who work in the private sector and all. So there has to be some data is important. Having an evaluation is important.
And I see what you're saying, Lucy, but I feel like we're almost at June here. So if you say we're going to have another conversation about it in a month, we're then in July. And so I feel like we have to make some sort of statement here that we're either going to meet within a week or two to be able to figure out if this is what we're going to implement for 4th, 5th, and 6th, or we are getting into the summer. So maybe Doug or Cheryl or Stephanie and Liza, someone can talk on that. You know, at what point can we no longer change this schedule for next year?
Well, let me say this again, Tina, and welcome, Tina. I think one of the challenges here is we've talked a lot about time and schedule. We've also talked about curriculum and programming and things of that nature. We want the board to be supportive of anything that we're doing. And I know you guys want to support us and feel good about it. The lens that I have is that what Cheryl is proposing is a reorganization of time. And I really do believe that's in the purview of the site-based leadership and the staff at the school. I know she's worked with that 6th grade team and others to do that, just like Noelle has done that. And I think it's important for you guys to understand that. I think how the time is organized is very different than the actual curriculum and the program that's being taught. And I guess my other lens on it is the practical one of they've put a lot of work into this. So if they were going to make a fundamental shift off of this, based on your feedback, could we do it? Sure, we could. Would it be any better? And I think the other point too is I always want to caution all of us on thinking that what we're currently doing is necessarily best for the children. I think Lucy said something about experimenting. That term makes me uncomfortable. I like to think it's innovating. I mean, all of our leaders are trained on don't just keep doing what you've always done and assuming it's better. Again, we're going to transition to the data here. I think we need to do something more purposeful in the way of math and ELA if we want to see improvement, not just in scores, but in children's experience, as Cheryl said, as they get to high school and more of them available to have more choices in these pathways that Deb and Katie and Liza are developing for us. So having said all that, I mean, you guys are the board. If you're really not comfortable with any of this, I guess we need to know that and then have to kind of retool and go back. But I guess we need to be clear on that because I don't think you guys want to get in the business of dictating what the master schedule is or isn't. But maybe you do. I don't know. It's more of a question.
No, Doug, I actually don't think that's what it is. And let me be very clear as to why we're even having this conversation today is because this should have come to the board sooner. We should have had this information months and months and months ago where you got it buy-in from the Board of Education to do a change like this. It is a master schedule change. It is with the purview of our administration. But when it borders the line of changing curriculum and changing when certain subjects are being taught, and there's a huge
much?
chunk of time in between when subjects are being taught, it does skirt the line of curriculum. And I feel like the conversation we're having here is, you believe it's under the administration's purview, and I'm asking that the board be a very large stakeholder in curriculum. And that is what is important to me. And I think we're here today because of the fact that a few board members had children who did the orientation for the fifth graders coming up to sixth, and saw a schedule that was drastically different than what was currently being done for sixth grade. And if we don't continue to work together and be stakeholders, it's going to be very difficult for our students to be successful, for our teachers to be happy and working hard and not feeling like they have to change things constantly because of certain things that come up that, you know, maybe we are not aligned on. And I just need that to be clear right now. We are not in the business of doing the administrators' jobs. We are in the business of making sure that our students are successful and our community is happy.
And I don't disagree with anything you said, Lindsay, and I certainly apologize that we didn't bring this to you sooner. We should have.
As do I.
Yeah, and that's been happening a lot more than we find things out from other sources, not from where we should be getting it, and that's directly from you or the administration. So anyway, I think I'd like to move on to our next item.
My hand is up.
Whose hand is up? I didn't see
Hey,
it.
Linda.
Oh, sorry. I couldn't see it. It was up on the white wall there.
You
It's
should
fine.
have
This is
started
actually-
singing. That would have helped, Linda.
Oh, that's a good point. This is actually a pretty good transition comment / question, I think, to jump into some numbers here. And because one of the things that I've been thinking about, and I am in the process of a mind shift, is knowing what is 100% in our purview of the board is the evaluation of the superintendent. And holding the superintendent accountable for the direction of the district. And I will publicly apologize to Liza, who took the shrapnel and the flak at our last student achievement meeting, when in reality, my question for you, Doug, as we transition is, what has been your directive to our schools, to our administrators, as to the accumulation of, analysis of, and what we're doing with the data? My fear is the fact that the way we've gotten our data, right, is a reflection on your leadership, is a reflection on the data climate that you have created. My fear, and what I right now believe, is that your belief in the role of data is different from the board's belief. And I'm wondering, is that because, as you so frequently mentioned in your experience, maybe in Virginia, it doesn't play the same role that it does in Connecticut, that we are a data-driven state in education. So my question to you is, what expectations have you put on your administrators as far as the role of data? Thank you.
So with respect, is this a student achievement meeting or is this an evaluation of me?
So again, look, if you want me to go after your people because the data that they are presenting is inadequate for what we're asking for and have been asking for, after our first student achievement meeting, Doug, I said to you, I think they could use some coaching on presenting data, and that was 2 years ago. So yeah, sure. If you want to talk data, let's talk data. But I want to know, what is the culture for data in our district? And that starts with you. So if you want, Doug, that was like such a insincere question to ask, because I'm trying to get, look, it's not the people. Maybe it's not the people, which we've been assuming. What are you telling them? And then when you talk about, well, we want to give them the freedom and the power in their buildings, I agree. But then we need to see, who do we hold accountable for missteps? So if you don't want it to be on them, it's got to be on you.
I don't disagree with that at all.
So that maybe you can ratchet back your snarky comment.
Excuse me?
Maybe you can ratchet back your snarky comment about what kind of meeting this is.
I just think this isn't the place for that in this public forum, but if you do, I apologize.
I think I'd like to move forward to item number 6.
Now, wait a minute, this is moving forward. I want to know what the culture and climate is for data is in our district. What,
I think
how are we using it?
Right. And the question would be, how much importance does, well, one of your questions, how much importance does the superintendent put on data, number one, because that's going to drive how the data is presented, if it's presented, when it's being done. And that's where I think, so it's not necessarily an attack. It's just if you don't think it's important, no one else is going to think it's important. And that's critical because we do. But.
And so that's the question.
Yep.
This will be quick, but one question I do get a lot from community members, we hear the $27,000 or wherever we're at now per student. And again, that's not a valid number. I'm telling that right off the bat. But so many of the feedback that I get from community members are, sure, you're going to spend the money, but we want results. And the only way we can tell them results is with good data, indeed.
Right. That's true. True. So I think we should move forward. I know, Linda, you have a question, and maybe that's better answered in another forum rather than at this point in time. Let's see what we have for.
Sorry, I want to circle back briefly to just a logistical question on the period schedule length. Will that create any issues with teachers in prep period time? Because, okay, what are they given, one prep period? Some people will get 80 minutes, some people will get less. I'm not sure how that's going to work.
Is Cheryl still with us?
Yeah, my mute button sticks, so I try not to turn myself off, but I did. We've already looked at that. I've talked to our union rep, and it is equal time for not only teaching, but also for their prep time.
Thank you.
Yeah. So moving on to item.
Did you want me to?
Else?
Did you want me to start the discussion?
You said you were going to cover the iReadies, the SATs, and the EL.
Yes. In preparing for this, and talking with Lucy and sending out the folder that was asked of, I have shared the student, I've shared a student achievement data folder. I was asked to make slides that have by grade level per year. And so I have done that with the data that we currently have available. And that is in the student achievement folder, and that will be added to and revised as new data becomes available, as that will be a continuous document per a request for that. That is also available for anyone who would like to see that. It is open to the public per request as well, that anyone with the link can view. So in talking first, we have the SATs. Would you like me, Lucy, would you like me to share my screen, or would you like everyone to open it?
I can't open it, so if you could share the screen.
Sure. Okay. So we have here the years, the SATs, the average scores in math and in reading for the district. These are 11th graders who take the SAT in March. The district reading scores from 2016 to 2024. 2016 is the year that the SAT went back to a 1600 grading scale from a 2400 grading scale. So we are starting there. And then just as a little side note, in 2024 was the first time that it was a computer adaptive test. So all learners took it on the computer and it was adaptive. You wanting to know, Lucy mentioned she wanted to know the trends. The trend looks to be that numbers are declining slightly after COVID. I have also put the state average here, as this is a sometimes used way to establish where one is regarding their SAT scores. Again, year to year, this is not cohorted. This is a group of 11th graders who are taking it and have not taken it previously. Here, so we have the district reading scores. We have the state reading scores here, which is the average score. And then we have the difference between the state average and the district average. Then same consideration for math. This year it went down approximately 19 points. Again, compared to the state, it is not so much out of trend, but of course we want to see that these scores remain high. I have also included a visual chart that shows the scores, blue being reading, writing, and red being math for 2016 to 2024, and the trend lines for the state to show the difference in the state score versus the district score. Then what is comparable here for grade 11, they also take the PSAT in the fall. That is in around the October timeframe. So the math PSAT in fall 2023 for our grade 11 students was 475. And the SAT spring, which is March 2024 for our 11th graders, is 501, which is an increase of 26 points. The PSAT is supposed to be a predictor of the SAT score if taken on the same day. So we are looking to see the growth from fall to spring. It is not supposed to be the same. It is, we are looking to see the growth, and we've seen a growth of 26 points. And then we see here 501 versus 532 for reading, which is 31 points, a growth in the average. This in the previous year, again, these are not same students, but the math PSAT in 2022, 497 to the SAT 521. And that is an increase of 24 points. And here we have 525 to 530, which is an increase of 5 points for that year's cohort. And then I went back to 21-22. We have 475 to 526, which is a large increase of 51. And then we have in reading 522 for the PSAT to 542, which is an increase of 20. So as I mentioned, the trend is that math is moving down slightly. We'll have to keep an eye on that, of whether it was this particular group or whether that trend continues. Again, we are talking about how we are going to improve in our math areas, and there are several things that are being done and are planned for. Are there any, so then the next thing that Lucy had mentioned was after trends that we would have a discussion, correct, Lucy? You wanted to have a discussion regarding this?
That was a suggestion that I put out there just to kind of give you an idea of what you might expect. When I look at the SAT scores, you know, I of course, you go back to 2016, we had 2020 in between. So you expect it to have a drop, but we're still seeing it for 3 years, 2022, 23, and 24. And I know you're going to say that's the same trend that's happening across the state, but the state is an average of your city districts as well as your rural districts. So I don't know what the situation was during COVID, in some of the districts, some of the city districts, the urban districts. I know that our district was right on top of the education, and we kept the students out for as short amount of time as we possibly could before we started to pull them back in again. So I find it concerning that the trend there, it's still seeming to be going down instead of coming back up. And we're nowhere near where it was back in 2016 or 2017 or even 2018 or 2019 for that matter. There was something else I was going to say and I forgot what it was, but anyhow. Anyone else have any thoughts? Oh, I'm sorry, you were talking about remediation. You might be referring to the 6th grade, the proposed change in the schedule and the increase in time for math, but that's 6th grade. What's going on in the high school? What's happening now in order to make changes in all the grade levels? It shouldn't just be happening in 6th grade. That means we'd have to wait another 2, 3, 4, 5 years to see the difference.
So as mentioned in the last meeting, the things that some of the things that we are doing within district, besides the schedule changes, there are some in the district that are working on playlists. As I'm going to say in the iReady math scores, what I notice about in iReady math is that the growth of the percent of children on grade level does increase each year, and is in many grade levels stays consistent, but it starts lower and lower each year. And so what it gets to is lower and lower each year. And what I'm know from analysis, and there are some others in the district that are looking at the actual areas within math and the scores within those areas. They're looking at the need to address some of the content that may have been missed for whatever reason, or not yet learned. And sometimes that extends beyond the grade level. And as you get lower and lower beyond your grade level, there needs to be some help in that area. And so these playlists are supposed to take a skill down further into more understandable chunks and to meet the learner where they are and bring them forward. And I know Stephanie can talk a little bit more about the playlist, as she is former math teacher and very skilled in that area. And then also we have the EL implementation, which we know is based on the science of reading, which we are, as I mentioned, we don't have the DIBELS scores yet. It is the only grade level that is fully complete is kindergarten, but we are seeing some good gains in that. And then Stephanie is also talking to some EL data later. We are planning on a curricular review cycle in math, and that is going to start. It is next up on the cycle. So we are thinking of that as a step to ensure that our curriculum is meeting what we need for all learners to be to meet the needs of all learners. We've also mentioned that there's personalized professional learning that can be used for a teacher who needs the professional learning in this area to help them grow. And then there are also some instructional strategies that are being introduced through the play-based learning, which will help in all academic areas. So those are just some of the things. And I can't see everybody because I'm sharing my screen. So I'm not sure if there's anyone else who is raising their hand.
I can just include for the high school math in particular as well. I mean, I know Liza spoke to the playlist, but we do recognize that there's a lot of work that needs to be done with the high school math curriculum. You know, one thing that we've actually most recently had a conversation about is the algebra curriculum. There's a lot of time spent in that curriculum, repeating skills that the kids should already know that they've learned in the past grades, things that we shouldn't need to spend so much time on. And that takes a lot of time away from being able to introduce new skills. And so that is something that we are going to begin working on this summer. One thing that's really difficult about looking at curriculum, revising it, building these playlists, and doing all of this work is that it requires time and it requires people. And those are two things that we're very limited on. One thing, you know, that we would love to try to do is to, you know, try to pull staff in a couple of times a year to work on building curriculum, making sure that there's that vertical alignment, that we're not missing anything, developing or looking for more rigorous tasks. But what's very difficult about doing that is that, you know, unfortunately, sub coverage is a huge issue right now for everybody, not just for our district. And in order to be able to pull staff out, we need people to be able to help cover those classes, and we just don't have that. So it is something that we recognize. It's something that, you know, the math at the high school is something we're going to start working on this summer. Deb and I actually had a conversation about it this morning. And then, like Liza said, we are starting to build the playlist, and we do have some staff members that have offered to come in and do some curriculum work for pay over the summer to help to start develop those playlists, to help to start develop those pre-assessments that we've been talking about. And we are really, really, really aiming to get, you know, a lot done by the end of the summer. But again, what's very difficult about all of this work is just, again, the people and the time. So we are working as fast as we can. We recognize what needs to be done, but definitely looking at those high school math courses, we do recognize it needs to be more rigorous. We need to stop spending so much time reviewing things that the kids probably already know or might not need as much time reviewing. And then we also are going to be working with our departments a little bit more to start bringing some new instructional approaches into the classroom, you know, less lecturing and more getting those building thinking classroom routines and just other instructional strategies and, you know, things that will really help to kind of make things a little bit better.
I just wanted to jump in for a minute. Thank you, Stephanie. I don't envy your job or Liza's job right now. This seems to be an incredible, I mean, just the number of things that I printed out today with numbers, and poor Liza, I feel like you want to read us everything, and like, there's a lot. And then Stephanie, when you're talking about, you know, your plans and the plans for developing like a group to talk about math curriculum and all that stuff, like there's like background. Maura, if you could mute, that would be great. Your job description has changed so many times over the last, I don't know how long, year, has it been a year and a half, going on 2 years now? And I feel like, again, I said it earlier, I'm going to say it again. This group is like the think tank for student achievement, curriculum development, and review. It doesn't mean that Tina develops curriculum the way she thinks it's supposed to be done, but that means that we can share some of the burden. And as you're both speaking now, my heart goes out to both of you, because this is a lot to be doing, K-12. So Doug, I've got 2 requests of you. One is to put together some sort of curriculum review specifically related to enabling teachers to take the time to get together and have some professional development, and do that not just for math, but for ELA, science, and social studies as well. Because clearly from our discussion earlier, there are some definite concerns about the science and the social studies implementation. And that is not something that Liza and Stephanie should be doing independently on their own with all the other things that are in their job description. The second thing that I'm going to request, and I think this would be monumental in helping move things forward so that we're all rowing in the same direction and we all feel like we're on the side of the kids and their achievement, is to really consider bringing back those team leaders. We could be sitting here as a group right now talking to, and we're going to get to NGSS, and I have questions about NGSS, but a science teacher should be answering those questions. Somebody who is a K-12 team leader should be able to answer the questions about NGSS benchmarks, benchmark assessments, formative assessments, why scores look the way that they do in a content area that they are specialized in, that they are trained in, and that they are the expert in. Stephanie and Liza are brilliant and smart and bring a lot to the table, but we need to share some of this so that we are getting it done sooner, and not putting all the onus on 2 people in a district full of talented people. So those are my 2 requests for you.
Are there any other thoughts? Linda, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Do all of our students take the SATs?
Do all take the SATs?
Yeah.
Yes, and anyone that is absent or is has another time that they can take it.
Thank you.
Does that include those students with disabilities, learning support needs, kids with IEPs who are significantly unable to?
Yes, those that they have accommodations that we have to write to the College Board to have approval, and then they will take it. The few students that do take the CTAA or CTAS, I will have to check on that. I'm not sure about those few students, but those with IEPs, then their accommodations are given to College Board for review, and then they will take it with those accommodations.
It certainly doesn't help matters when we see a lot of things on television about how many colleges and universities are saying, well, we don't really use those SAT scores anymore. I do wonder if that filters down to the kids. And I know I personally didn't put a lot of effort into the SAT. I did it reluctant, spending the money on it. And then I went back to the restaurant and washed dishes afterwards. But anyway.
Well, but some of them are starting to put importance on the SATs again, some of the colleges. Okay, if there aren't any more questions about the SAT, we could move on to the iReady. And I have a question before you start. Are we not using the iReady anymore?
So, iReady Reading was used this year only in grades 6 through 8, and it was taken in the fall and the spring. And an IAB, which is an interim assessment that is in the same system as SBAC, was taken in winter. We are moving away from iReady. We don't feel like it gives us the data that it needs, and we also don't feel like the students, especially at the upper grade levels, are invested. That is the feedback we have heard from both teachers and from students. So we are hoping to move away from iReady because we had DIBELS that we implemented in K through 5 for this year. We did not do iReady Reading. DIBELS took the place of that. We still did do iReady Math, K through 8. Again, 6 through 8 took it in fall and spring, with the IAB in the winter to practice for the SBAC and also to start seeing those scores. When we go through the math section, there are scores from first grade, because K doesn't take it till later in the year. So from first grade through 8th, but for reading, it's currently only 6 through 8, and it was only in the fall and the spring. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. I want to make sure I got it all. Okay. So let me share this then. Okay, so iReady Math, again, asked for by year, by grade level. I started off with the district. In the years 2018 to 2019, it was only in 3 bands. So that is why these are connected. And then 2020 through 2024, it was the data was divided into 5 bands. That is why you see 5 different boxes, 2020 to 2024. 2017 to 2018 was not available I even wrote the rep who said that there needs to be a special archive of that. So I was unable to get that at this time. And as I said previously, the district trends, it shows that there is a similar, if we go September to March throughout for the district, we see that the increase in those learners that are at grade level between September through March increased at a pretty static rate. However, if you see here, the numbers that are starting at grade level are decreasing. And that is why we need to make sure that we are going back far enough for those learners who need it, and to personalize that experience and make sure that those that learning that has not been mastered yet is mastered prior to moving forward. So that is slowly going down. Every grade level is a little bit different. And again, this is not cohorted. I was asked by grade, to present by grade. So if you wanted cohort, I could do that. But here is grade 1. And it's a little easier to see when I move to this slide to just break it down a little more. Here in September, we have, as I mentioned, a decrease in those that are starting on grade level. And then we have an increase that is slightly down here. But then when you start lower, you end lower. So we need to make sure that we're making up that learning that is not fully happening, because as we move up in grade level, we're seeing this even more and more. Here is grade 2, again, in the 5 bands from 2020 to 2024. And then here again in September, we actually, so as I said, every grade level is different. Every group of children is different. Every child is different. But we're talking about overall trends in the group here. And so here we have 14 moving up to 22%. And then we have 65 and then ending at 60%. So going slightly down in the increase in those in grade level. This is similar here throughout almost all the slides. And then here again, you have in grade 4, it's kind of like, okay, 18, 25, 19, 27, different groups of learners. And then we have here the increase, a large increase here, 51, and then 27, 29, 32. So pretty static in that. In grade 5, we have a less increase. And so this is something we really need to look at as far as grade 5 math. Starting each group of learners starting at a lower baseline and then increasing not as much as we hope. So that's where we need to really look at that area. As far as grade 6 is concerned, again, a lower starting baseline throughout the 4 years, and then similar increases. Except 22, 23, there was a larger increase. When we get into grade 7, here we have 43, 31, 34, 39, starting as the baseline in September, and in March, moving to 57, 48, 51, and 50, which again is various percent increase, all within the teens. And then in grade 8, we have 45 over here, but 44, 44, 33, and 18. So this is a large dip here in this group at the starting, and then 58, 58, 50, and 20. So this is something, and this is only plus 2%. We have, and this is, I have seen that classroom, and I know there's a lot of learning going on. So this is something that we're really going to have to look at and monitor. I do not want to make a gross assumption based on one test at the end, towards the end of the year for 8th graders in a classroom that has been showing amazing things and growth. And I know Stephanie can attest, having done math and these tests, that we need to really see if this is representative of the learning taking place, or if there are other factors in here. I absolutely do not want to make any sort of sound like it's any sort of excuse at all. But what I do want to caution is that we see some great learning in that classroom.
So
Lindsay?
how do you, what data shows that there's great learning happening?
So I could speak to that.
Thank you.
So Jen Penny has shifted the way that she's really focusing on the learners master, whether or not they're mastering those skills. And so instead of looking at it from like a whole unit perspective or a whole lesson perspective, she's actually already doing what we're working towards doing with these playlists, where she has everything. And I've seen the way that she's broken it down. It's amazing. It's a lot for a teacher to keep track of, but it's so helpful. She has everything broken down by standard. And what she does in her classroom is she goes around and she watches what they're doing. She listens to what they say. And then in addition to her classroom assessments, she documents whether or not those kids had mastered those standards, and they actually cannot move on until they do master those standards. And so when, Liza and I started having conversations about this assessment and this score, I right away said, this definitely doesn't line up with what I've seen and what I've heard from Jen Penny in relation to the data that she collects in her classroom with those standards, those specific standards. Like Liza said, I mean, 8th graders taking these assessments, and again, we don't ever want to make any assumptions, but my experience has been, by the time they take these assessments, they kind of look at them as they're irrelevant. I've actually had kids come up to me in the past and say, why do we need to take this when we're going to the high school next year? What do you really do with this? That's part of those conversations of making sure that our kids know the reason why we're giving them these assessments. Why, I think that those conversations are huge, because we don't want them to just think we're putting them on a computer and having them take a test for no reason. We want them to understand why we're having them do that, what we're doing with those numbers. But
my question would be, Stephanie, I see what you're saying, but if you look at 2018, 2019, all the way through, you're seeing consistently that the scores are about the same. And then we're seeing 2023, 2024, 18 to 20. I have 2 kids in that grade, so I see the great work that Jen Penny does, and I think that they are learning, but are they learning what they need to go up to 9th grade next year? Are they learning the standards that are needing to be met to go on to Coggins next year? Do we anticipate that they are not meeting those standards? Do we think that these kids, for some reason, this is one grade that just no longer wants to take the test? I get what you're saying, and we have to look into the why, but I think for the board's perspective and student achievement perspective, we need to say, okay, is there another factor that is other than what we are currently giving them?
Right.
are they ready for next year? Can we confidently say that, and how can we?
Right.
When in September do we give the assessment?
It is within the, let's see, Dibbles, within the first 2 weeks.
We may see, you know, obviously the summer slide and they forget how to school and for a while. So maybe if that testing window is at the end of the month in September, we won't see such low baseline scores. And then that's just a comment, I guess, but a question that I have is, and I apologize for the pack here. What? Nope, gone. I'm distracted by 6 dogs. Sorry, I'll remember in a second.
So at the end of the year, at the end of the month.
So do we think we have an analysis on that, on whether we think that 8th grade class has sufficient knowledge to go on to integrated and algebra for next year? I guess that's my question.
Based on what I've seen, and I would obviously have to go back and speak further with Jen and look at the data even more that she has collected, but based on what I have seen, she is covering the standards that she should be covering in 8th grade. And again, there's students that are struggling with the content, and she's doing a really good job with, you know, personalizing it for them, with really working with them one-to-one. Again, she has the whole building thinking classroom routine, which is really, really beneficial for these kids. It really helps them to collaborate and talk through the problems. But based on what I have seen so far, and again, I'll have to have a more, another conversation with her, but she has been teaching the standards that she needs to cover, which will prepare the kids for when they go up to the high school. And again, when we're looking at the high school, what we need to work on is not spending so much time repeating those skills that they've already mastered in 8th grade. But you know, again, I'll have another conversation with her, but based on what I've seen, she's preparing them for what is to come.
I think,
Yeah, because that was my big question when we're talking about, you know, the in-room and the co-teaching model in the 8th grade. And my concern is the shift to 9th grade with algebra and integrated math, that they are then going back to a different way of being taught. And I worry about a lot of the kids with executive functioning memory and really having a hard time building upon math and making math relevant to what they're learning that following year, along with having that summer slide. That's my only concern. And I, you know, as a parent, I haven't been in the classroom to see it, but I do see the connections being made, and I do see my own children's love for math happening. I just want to make sure that it's traveling with them, and what they're getting and what they're going to be anticipating for next year is not going to be a struggle based on how they've been taught this year. And you may not have the answer for that at this very moment, but it is something I'd like to get some answers to, and to think about.
I think if I could, I want to piggyback on what Lindsay just said and say that, like, you know, the covering the standards and evidence of mastery, obviously those are 2 different things. We know that. And I also know, and I've worked with Jen Penny for a long time, and I know that there must be other classroom assessments that she's working on. I mean, this isn't the only thing that kids are working on. So I think, to piggyback on what Lindsay said, you know, evidence of mastery can look different across the board. And I think that might be what Lindsay's looking for. And my question was, in terms of placement for students for next year, how much, if any, does iReady impact where they get placed for next year, whether it be Algebra 1, geometry, integrated math, Algebra 2? Do you know by any chance?
I don't. I mean, I know what my thoughts are, but I don't know what they look at Strong. That is something that, again, I would need to reach out to Jen and see specifically what she looks at when she's making those recommendations, because I do not have that answer for you right now. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's okay.
Stephanie, I'll jump in.
Thank you. I
do
forgot.
know-
I didn't know you were there.
Yeah, I'm still here listening. It is taken into account, but it's not by any means the end all be all. We're also looking at how they're doing in the classroom, how they're doing on the class assessments. It's just another piece of data for her. And then we also have conversations with students and ask them to also talk with their parents about where they think they fit in. So it's fluid.
That's a good question, Tina, because if the students, and this is another issue that is not just here in RSD 13, but why are we taking the test? Does it go on my report card? Am I going to get a grade for it? I heard that for years. Is there some way, and I know, I think about New York, where the students do not move on to the next grade level until they pass what they call Regents exams. So even though I know some students don't do as well with testing as other students, that's what their gateway is to the next grade level. You know, you can think about this, is there some way to put a little bit more importance on these tests, especially for 8th grade, part of which you just talked about what their placement is going to be next year in high school in their math. So that they look at it as something that's really worth a little bit more than just wasting my time. Just something to think about. Did you have any questions, Linda?
Well, no, no.
No, you're okay. Okay. So we'll move on to the EL.
Do
Which
you
is
want
out
me
of now.
to,
I
I didn't
hope
put
they-
together, oh, go ahead.
I hope they gave you those graphs because I wouldn't know how to put them together.
No, they didn't. That's why it took so long to get them to you.
Well-
So, do you want me to present the document or just talk about it? Because I didn't put this on a fancy slideshow because it would have been like 5 million slides long. So what would you like me to do?
Yeah, I think going through it doesn't really make much sense because there's so much missing from it. Like we're missing end of year, we're missing some benchmarks. If we could just do a quick overview, I think,
absolutely,
of what the change is between iReady to EL, and then maybe we can have some questions.
Yes.
But I do think we're going to have a really hard time, analyzing this until we have end of year.
So the reason why the end of the year isn't there yet is because, first of all, we kind of had to put things on hold so that kids can finish other assessments that we needed to do, other benchmark assessments that we have, DIBELS, and iReady math assessments. But they should be there. They've been working on them. So as students are finishing those assessments, they've kind of been continuing to work on the benchmark assessments. But one thing that's really important to understand, and Deb Mariani did a great job talking about all of these assessments in detail back in March. So I would definitely recommend going back and rewatching that piece of that meeting. Because it really helps to understand what these assessments are used for. So these are just K-2 skills block. And there's five assessments altogether, but not all grade levels are going to take all 5 of those assessments. And further, not every child is going to take all 5 of those assessments. And that is where it becomes competency-based. So, that letter, name, and sound identification is that first assessment that all of the kids are going to take in kindergarten, for example, because if they can't identify their letter names and sounds, then they're going to have a hard time going on to that spelling skills assessment and then further into the decoding skills. And so that's kind of where it becomes a competency based, because if I'm a child that masters those skills the first time that I take that test, my teacher, as a teacher, I'm not going to put that child through taking that test again when I know they've already mastered those skills. Obviously, it's something that teachers continue to make sure that they assess within the classroom. They use those assessments to build their groups as they're going through those cycle assessments that Deb had spoken about. That's kind of what they use this benchmark data for. It's really to help them understand where are our learners at in that moment with those specific skills. What are they ready for? Are they ready to move on to the spelling skills, or do they still need to kind of work on that letter name and sound identification? Or have they mastered things and are they ready for the next step? And so when you're looking at that, and that's kind of why within the document, I kind of added some narrative in there to help you understand why things might look the way they look. Because not every, the percentages for some of the graphs, it doesn't, you really have to sit and think about the best way to present the data, because in some of those graphs that I gave you, you're not going to see percentages because it doesn't make sense to give you percentages since it's not the same amount of kids, or we're not looking at the same grouping of kids taking it. So it's all competency based, but basically what we want to make sure is happening within each of those benchmark assessments is we want to see movement. And at the start of each of those assessments that I gave you, I kind of helped you I gave little examples of what we're looking for when we're looking at those assessment numbers and what we need to see in order to make sure that our learners are learning and they're improving and they're ready to move on to the next skill. And so, I'm thinking of the spelling skills and how there's that partial alphabetic, the full alphabetic, the consolidated alphabetic, but then within that, there's like all these micro phases. And Deb Mariani is fantastic. She's got such a brain for all of this, but to go from, a full partial, or I'm sorry, a middle partial alphabetic list to go to a consolidated partial alphabetic list, or I'm sorry, I can't think of, because there's so many of them. But anyway, to go from one to the next, there's so many things that the kids have to master. And that's where those cycle assessments come in that are done within the classroom setting, basically within a small group with our teachers. And when we're looking at the data as a whole, it's what we want to happen is happening. Our kids are showing that they are making improvement. They're showing that they're mastering those skills. In some cases where they're not mastering the skill, the one time that they take the assessment, the teacher continues to work with them and then they take it again. So when I'm looking at an individual student's data, there are some instances where you do see a score a couple of times for the same assessment. And that's because they should not be moving on to the next skill until they've mastered that current skill. There are some students that master that skill, master the next skill, and then they're kind of stuck. So it's really interesting to see it when it's broken down from a student perspective. But when we look at it K2, the numbers are moving the way that we want them to move and the way that they need to move. Now, as far as next year goes, so first of all, I have a meeting with the coaches in 2 weeks on June 4th, I think. And part of our conversation on that day is really going to be to pull all of our information, all of our data, all the conversations that they've had with the teachers through PLC to look at these charts a little bit more and to talk about what we need to fix, modify, improve, et cetera, for next year. I know one thing that we've already talked about is starting these a little bit earlier because we didn't do that this year. The reason why we didn't do that is because we didn't want to overwhelm everybody with starting all of this right from the start. So we kind of broke it down a little bit. Next year, we're not doing that. The teacher said, nope, we need to dive into it. End of September, actually, Linda, is when we're going to be starting off with our first assessments for EL. But we're starting with that skills block, right from the start. The other thing that I just found out on Monday, so I don't know too much about it yet. And I have a meeting with the rep next week, so I will learn more about it next week. But EL has actually modified some of these benchmark assessments to make them better. And how they did that was they got all of this feedback from teachers that have been implementing these benchmark assessments for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And they've made some improvements. I haven't seen any of them yet, so I can't tell you what they are. Again, I just found this out Monday. I was in a meeting with another district. And I will learn more about it next week, but that is something that I am looking forward to hearing about. And then obviously something that I will bring back to the coaches, and we'll have conversations about what makes sense for us moving forward for next year. So that's just
Now,
a
were
couple
those
things.
benchmarks changed because of having so many people in the EL program that chose it this year? Like, why all of a sudden did they change the benchmarks?
I think that's part of it. The program is a newer program, and I think that there hasn't been a whole lot of individual or groups, districts that have been using this program. And so now that they have so many more districts that are using it and implementing it, they're able to get a lot more feedback in terms of how things are going. And they've been making a lot of improvements throughout the year just from the feedback that they continuously get from the districts that are providing them. And again, they also have certain connections with a lot of districts, not just in Connecticut, but around the country, where they are actually taking their data and using their data in order to be able to make these decisions, making sure that they're more informed decisions and not just based off of feedback, but really based off of those numbers that they're getting. And based on the conversation I had with one of the reps, it's not just, you know, an urban district. It's not just a rural district. It's really a variety, a diverse group of districts that they're collecting this information from.
Right. And so when you talk about reps, are you talking about the reps that are doing the actual professional development? Like, because I know what happened was they didn't have enough professional development. We've been on it, you know, that they've been honest with that, and that we joined a cohort. And I know I recently asked you for those districts. You know, are those reps working with the districts that are in that PD cohort that are helping us? Because I feel like we're not hearing enough of that, and then hearing how that's transferring over to the staff and therefore transferring to the kids.
So it's not the same as those reps. It's really there's two individuals that I speak to directly when it comes to talking about anything EL, and they're individuals that actually have been a part of the team to develop this program. So those are the individuals that I have conversations with. As far as that cohort goes, we don't really bring anybody into that cohort. That's just a collaboration that we have amongst those districts in order to kind of share how things are going. I know most recently there's been some discussions around report cards, but we kind of figured out that report card changes are not really necessary because it's still kind of all aligned with the standards, and that's what our report cards look like. But that cohort, we're not working directly with a representative from EL. That's just kind of, we're doing that
So it's
together.
more like a support group? Are we talking like that these districts are getting together and kind of sharing and venting about frustrations? And if that's happening, where's our PD coming?
Not so much frustrations. It's really more so sharing ideas, sharing instructional practices, sharing things that, you know, if one grade level at a certain district feels that something was difficult or challenging for their group of students, then it's kind of a nice collaboration of ideas of instructional practices that they've been doing, or changes that they've made. And then as far as PD for our district, I mean, at this point, and I think we've said this before, our teachers don't really, and they've expressed this to us. It's not so much the PD that they need at this point, it's the time. It's the time that they need to be able to sit down and go through these modules and really have a strong understanding of, you know, just what they entail, where they are coming from, where they are going, because there's a lot of information within each of them to digest. And so they kind of already feel very strongly about the structure of the modules and how everything is supposed to be laid out, and how to differentiate. Obviously, that is something that's going to change because your kids always change every year. But they just, at this point, it's more the time that they need to be able to just look and digest those modules and figure out what changes they feel they need to make for the kids that are sitting in their class.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. Before we adjourn the meeting, I would like to say to Doug that the question that Linda asked you before, I believe needs to be addressed. And I'd like you to address that in writing to the group that's here. But I'm gonna have Linda restate the question so it comes out the way it should.
Sure, thank you. The crux of it is, what is your vision for the culture for data in the district? So what direction have you given building level leaders as to the collection of and the use of data?
Okay, got it.
Okay. And I'd like to thank.
Did we talk about NGSS? Did I miss the data on NGSS?
No, we didn't talk about it.
Talk about it this time, but we can still, if anyone has any questions about any of the other data that we received.
And NGSS is being taken right now. So that's not gonna come, that comes out with SBAC. So SBAC and NGSS are taken within a certain window. And it is, the high schoolers took it this morning. So that data comes out with the SBAC data.
Right. And in one of the handouts, the Connecticut Next Gen Accountability Indicators, and there is also data on the EdSite website online. I would ask for the next time when we talk about this, we've got, the performance index for science and the scores online. My request for next time would be to two things. One, we paid CREC a lot of money in 2018 to work with our staff on creating bundles and proficiencies that were in alignment with not only Common Core, but also engineering design principles, cross-cutting concepts. What do you call it? It starts with a P, I can't remember it. Anyway, where are we with that? Like, is our instruction still in alignment? Go ahead, Stephanie.
I can tell, I can tell you for grades 6 through 8 this year, we started to implement the Open SciEd, which is a fantastic new curriculum that was developed, and the high school teachers have started to look into Open SciEd to bring it up to the high school as well.
Okay.
So that's where we're at with that. And from what my conversations with the science teachers at the middle school is that not only are they enjoying it, but the kids are really enjoying learning from it. And I went to a PD from Linda, your friend, a couple of months ago. He's fantastic, but I know I don't teach it, but it seems like a really, really solid curriculum. It's just the whole way that it's broken down for the kids. It really throws a lot of inquiry based in there, a lot of hands-on approaches. I think it's a really, really good thing that we brought that in.
And you said that was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade?
Yes, and then the high school is currently exploring it to just decide what they're going to do next year.
Alrighty. So in terms of that, so let me ask my second question first. In terms of like doing that and moving forward, like, again, the objective of student achievement is to be like, the group that reviews, implements, changes. Again, I can't say this enough, not that we dictate what teachers teach, but we support and, kind of walk in step with them as that's happening, so that it is a team effort, and so that we can, we can publish curriculum that we're developing, which leads me to our website. And I know this is not on the, I have no idea whose purview this is, but our website currently represents, the bundles that were developed in 2018. My old tech ed curriculum is still up there. I don't know if it's being followed, the science, the social studies, the 5th and 6th grade. And that should, if we're going to put our name on it, it should be what is representative of what the students are actually learning. And then my other question, sorry, about NGSS would just be like, when we're looking at, when we're looking at the summative assessments with the NGSS annual test in grades 5, 8, and 11, if I got that right. What interim assessments are being given to inform instruction moving forward? You know, and how is that informing, how is that data informing moving forward, and you know, like help, like informing the staff at the high school and at Strong that pivoting is actually in the kids and their achievement best interest. Does that make sense? Okay.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts or questions?
Tina, welcome. Conchetta, I'm not sure which I go with. I nominate you for
Tina's good.
co-chair of the Student Achievement Committee.
Roar her back.
We'll be there. Thank you so much. I started to say before, Stephanie and Liza, there's a lot of information to put together, and we appreciate it. And if we have any further questions, we will put it back on another agenda. Lindsay?
Yeah, before we end, I just want to close out and segue and try to give a plan. Do we plan on bringing this to the full board in June to talk about the schedule for 5th and 6th? Are we scheduling another meeting for student achievement? Because I just don't feel like we had a closeout on that. And I know that Noelle left early. So I don't know if anyone has any.
I'd like to have another student achievement meeting sometime in June, maybe not June 22nd, which I believe would be the next date, because that's after school is already out. Perhaps you can find another time in between.
We could do that, but we're going to have a regular board meeting before then. So we can have a discussion about it, but we may want to just add it as an agenda item to loop everybody in.
Or we could do that. But we'll have to come up with a dates. Our next board meeting is June
5th.
8th?
5th.
5th, okay. All right, we can figure that out. Either we add it on to our Board of Ed meeting, we do it as a workshop before the board meeting, unless if we don't have any other meetings.
We could just add it on as an agenda item and take it off as a committee report and loop it in as one item.
Okay, we could do that. Okay, any other thoughts or comments? It is 6:46.
I move to adjourn.
Been here a long time.
Second, Lindsay.
Lindsay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Have a
Thanks,
good night,
everyone.
everybody. Thank you
Aye.
for everything. Bye.